What is up, guys? It's your boy SkiDDz here, and today we are playing CarX Drift Racing Online. In today's CarX Drift Racing Online video, I'll be showing you guys how to tune cars in CarX Drift Racing. I will be trying to keep everything as simple as possible and break it down so that literally anybody will be able to watch this video and walk away knowing how to tune. So with that being said, I hope you guys find a lot of great tips in this video. I hope you guys drop a like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. And with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and get right into the video and start explaining the first steps to getting your car drifting right so that you can go online, get sideways, play with your friends, maybe even compete in comps, or maybe become CarX's new favorite tuner. And with that being said, let's get into it. What's up, guys? It's your boy SkiDDz here, and today we are playing CarX Drift Racing Online. I just want to say thank you guys for joining in on this video, and good morning, good evening, or good night, whatever time it may be for you. But with that being said, we have some important things to discuss today, because in today's video I will be telling you guys, not only telling you and showing you, but teaching you how to tune in CarX. I'm gonna teach you guys how to tune one car, and all you have to do is take all of the information and knowledge that I give you from that car, and then use the same things from the tune that you build if you like it, and start applying it to other cars and make micro adjustments. And you'd be surprised at how many cars you can tune on your own and how easy it really is to be able to tune. Now before we get into it, I know I haven't made a how to tune video in like almost 2 years now, but I feel like it's about time to, you know, go ahead and drop another video on how to tune, because you know, a lot of people have been asking for a minute, and I honestly just haven't had the time or even the thought or headspace to even think of how to make a how to tune video. But in today's video, for example, we will be building the R32. I'm going to be showing you guys 3 different build types. Well, yeah, I'm going to show you guys a build that's like for 100 adhesion, which is one of the most popular adhesions, and then I'm going to show you guys a build for 90 adhesion, and then I'll show you a build for 120 adhesion. Now, when I break everything down, I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible so that anybody, even if you don't know about cars, you can understand it. I'm not going to try to make it super technical. I'm no expert. I'm just going to tell you guys what I know and tell you what settings affect your car in this game specifically and how they affect your car. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this video. I hope you guys enjoy. So the first thing you want to do in CarX, if you're new, you may not have this car, which means you're gonna have to do this on something that's like a class 1 or class 2. So honestly, you can go ahead and grab whatever car you want to tune right now. So if you want to go along with me, go ahead and grab whatever car you want to tune right now. First thing you want to do if you're new to the game, like I said, if you're new, you may have the drift setup and you may not have the ultimate setup, so you might have to leave this video, go stack some money, and then come back and get the ultimate drift setup. So like I said, if you're new, go stack your money, get your levels up, get the ultimate drift setup. But if you're not new, go ahead and get the ultimate setup on the car. The ultimate setup in this game allows you to tune everything on the vehicle. Without the ultimate setup, you will not have a top tier drift car. With the drift setup alone, I mean, CarX, you guys should honestly just change the name of this to Ultimate Drift Setup, because people get confused because it says Ultimate. But with the drift setup alone, the only thing it allows you to change is your suspension settings, your wheels, and your brakes, which is very limiting in a game where people are competitive, where people want to get more angle. You know, people want to be able to transfer faster. People want to, I mean, not transfer, but transition faster. You know, people want to be able to do certain things, and it's like, if you're limited, you're only going to be able to do so much. So to unlimit yourself and be able to tune everything, go ahead and get the ultimate setup. The next thing you want to do, this isn't too important, but I'd say it's pretty important, because you don't want to make a tune on a stock body and then put a body kit on and have to adjust it. what you want to do before you even start making the tune in this game is you want to go ahead and grab whatever body kit that you want on the car, because it'll just make it easier for you in the long run. You won't have to come back, you know, switch it, do this and do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put a body kit on here, and yeah, so I have the body kit that I want. So the first thing you want to look at is the wheel track, or no, I'm just gonna start from the beginning. So spring length, basically your spring length, all it does is control the center of gravity, and it also stops your tires from rubbing in the wheel wells and coming through your fenders. I see a lot of people going online with cars that look like this, and this is not okay. Your tires should never come through the wheel well ever. If your tires are coming through the wheel well, your car is way too low. So with suspension, basically what you want to do is just make sure that it's sitting right above the tires. Depending on how big your tires are, you want to make sure that it's sitting right above the tire and not like digging into the tire. Another thing is too, a way to check how if you need to like raise or lower your suspension is if you go to Ackerman or if you go to Caster, it'll turn your wheel, and when you look right here, you can see when your car is fully locked if your tire is going to be rubbing through. Now remember that when you're driving, the car is going to be bouncing up and down too, so you want to keep that in mind. But so basically set your suspension somewhere where it has freedom to move and bounce, and so that your wheels are not rubbing through the fenders, quarter panel, or wheel well, whatever the case may be. Now spring stiffness. Now I don't know if you guys know what a spring is. Some people, I'm pretty sure you know what a spring is, but if you don't know what a spring is in this game, I know it sounds really dumb, but some people actually may not know. Basically the spring is right here. So this is your spring. Now in the settings, you can control the spring stiffness, and the spring stiffness is going to determine how bouncy the car is and how smooth the car rides. So when it comes to spring stiffness, it really just depends on the car's weight and the weight distribution of the car. But 9 times out of 10, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be having a setup where your front stiffness is going to be higher than the rear in most scenarios. Even right here, as you guys can see, I haven't even touched the tune yet, and it's already higher in the front. So you always want to make sure it's higher in the front. So for this car, what you want to do is I usually run my front spring stiffness no lower than 100. I'll either do 100, 105, 110, and basically the heavier the car, the heavier the number for the spring stiffness you're going to need, because with a lighter car, you're not going to need as much spring stiffness to like hold that weight up when you're like sliding around corners and stuff like that. But if you have a heavier car, because it's a little heavier, it may take a little bit more spring stiffness for it to, you know, get sideways and stay sideways. And if you don't believe me, you know, I've been tuning in this game for like a long time now, and every time my rear spring stiffness was too low, my car would have a very hard time getting sideways, taking transitions. It would feel like it was like, you know, really grippy in the back, which I don't like that. So for this car, a car that weighs about, let's see, so in this game I'd say about anything between 900 to 1300 like kilograms is really light. Like for example, this car weighs 1300 kilograms and the Nissan 180SX weighs 1200 kilograms. So these cars are really light. So if you guys don't know where to see the weight at, it's literally right here. You just look at the weight, and that'll kind of give you some like, I don't know, that'll kind of like help you with your build, like when you try to think about, you know, what spring stiffness you should run on a car. So in the rear, usually I run the rear about like, I don't know, 10 or 15 less than the front. You always want the front to be a little bit softer than the rear, because the front, you want more control up there, because that's how you're steering, that's where you're going to get your angle and control from. But the rear, you want it to be a little bit softer, just so you can you know, have it whip around and stuff like that. You don't want to have the rear the rear's more stiff than the front, because then the rear might, you know, spin more than the front, and you're going to get like a lot of oversteer. So the next thing right here, the dampers. So the dampers, I don't know why they call it dampers. I mean, they are dampers, but I like to just call them shocks. So you have your springs, and then you have your shock settings. So these are your spring settings. You have spring length and spring stiffness. and then you have your shock settings. These are your shocks. The lower these numbers are, the bouncier your car is in this game, unless you have really bad spring stiffness. So if you have really low dampers on certain cars, you may have to raise your spring stiffness if you notice your car is bouncing up and down when you rev and take corners. But what I found in this game is the lower your dampers are, well, not the lower, but if you can find a low spot in the damper section that fits your car perfectly, like if you can find the sweet spot for your car, like nobody knows exactly what number to put these at, you just have to feel for it. So each time, you know, you're in here tuning, you got to go to test drive, feel the tune out, come back, test drive, feel the tune out. But there's a magic number for every car when it comes to a lot of settings on those cars, when it comes to the suspension, the wheels, the transmission. The suspension and the wheels and the transmission are probably the most important settings. I wouldn't worry too much about the engine and brakes. Like for the engine, you could either leave it how you want or turn everything up. But I advise turning everything up, especially if you plan on going online, because I don't know anyone that plays with their settings down. And then the brakes for every car that you run, and this is pretty universal for every adhesion depending on how you build the car, you can run 3,500 brake torque every car and 70% front brake bias on every single car, literally. And if you press L2 in the game, which is your brake, your foot brake, if you press L2 when you're going around a corner, and your car feels like it wants to spin out, all you got to do is go ahead and come in here and lower that down. All right, but back to the suspension. So like I was saying, the lower you have the dampers, the more weight that will be sitting on the wheels, so it'll allow the car to get excuse me, it'll allow the car to get more grip, because more weight will be, like, you know, sitting on the wheels, which will plant the tires a lot better. So what I'm going to do for this car is, since I see that, you know, the rear are looking like they're around 4,000 to 6,000 and the front's looking like it's around 7,000 to 9,000, I'm gonna go ahead and set all my front ones at like 8K or around 7 to 8K, and then I'm gonna set the rear ones at around 4 to 7K. And you always want to keep your rear dampers lower than the front dampers. Same thing with spring stiffness. If you have springs that are stiffer in the front and springs that are less stiff in the back, and then you have dampers that are stiffer in the back and front dampers that are not as stiff in the front, it may cause some problems. Your build may feel really weird. So just make sure you correlate everything together so that it fits properly. So what I'm going to do for the back is I'm going to put all of my back dampers at 5K, and yes, you can use the same numbers for every single damper in the rear, but just because I'm setting it at 5K now does not mean that this number is going to feel good. It doesn't mean it's going to work. It doesn't mean I'm going to like it. I still have to try the tune out. So keep that in mind. And then the front ones, we're going to go ahead and set it to 8K. And the suspension is pretty simple. If your car feels too bumpy, you need to adjust everything in this section. So from front damper rebound all the way to spring stiffness, if your car feels bumpy, you need to turn these numbers up a little bit, but do them micro. Like if your car is at 210, or if your car's at 110 front, 95 rear, don't come in here and turn it all the way to 203. Like if it's at 95, put it at like 100, and then go from there, and then just keep adjusting. Do micro adjustments. I know it sounds very tedious, but if you don't do micro adjustments, you may, you know, end up frustrating yourself even more because you've adjusted too far and now your car won't drift at all, or whatever the case may be. So just keep that in mind. But if your car is too bouncy, these settings in here need to go up. And if your car is too stiff, maybe these settings need to come down a little bit. And you'll know if your car is too stiff if you, like, you know, if you're steering and your reaction to the input is like way too fast and it feels uncontrollable. Your spring stiffness could be too stiff, because the stiffer the spring stiffness, the better reaction you get out of like the steering and handling. Now for the toe, basically what the toe is this, man. So imagine you have your feet side by side, right? So toe out would be positive toe, which means you would point your 2 feet away from each other diagonally. That's toe out. In the rear of the car, you always want positive toe, which is toe out. And in the front of the car, you always want toe in. So turn your toes together now diagonally. That's toe in. In the front of the car, you always want toe in. It helps with turn in and transitioning and handling around corners. So usually what I run for my front toe is a negative 0.40, and then in the rear you make the toe positive, so the toe will be going inward together, so the tires will kind of be pointing toward each other. You can kind of see what I'm talking about as I do this. See the tire starts to turn in and it turns out. Negative, it goes out. Positive, it goes in. So as you guys can see there, so usually what I like to do, I never really run over like I've never ran over a 0.45 rear toe. And yes, I know the tuning numbers in these menus are really glitchy, but you just have to work with it and be patient. But I've never ran over a 0.45 toe. But usually what I run is I'll do a 0.30 to a 0.35 just for casual tunes I plan on taking in lobbies. You really don't need anything over that. Because all this is gonna make you do is just pull in more on corners, or especially for me, like on the straights, like when you straighten out for a second in transitions, it'll give you a little bit of a speed boost, or you know, when you're just going straight in general, it'll give you, you know, more speed and stability. But you really don't need too much, you know, rear positive toe or too much front toe. If you don't like these settings, go ahead and try something else. You could even do, you know, you could even do positive front toe and negative rear toe if you like. Just go ahead and experiment with that. But basically what I've seen is negative 0.40 toe works for me on any car. Basically, like I've never had to run like a different toe necessarily, like on a you know, on a different car build. So the toes are pretty universal. But what really helps me with rear toe is like when you have it at 0.35 or 0.30, I've noticed it helps you, you know, turn in on corners, and like, you know, it helps you stay on the track a little bit better in my opinion. So that's toe. The next thing is rear camber. So when I first started playing this game, I used to run a lot of rear camber, and I found out I was missing out on so much grip and speed and, you know, all that. It's not bad to run negative rear camber, but when you do this, you sacrifice speed and grip. I don't know if you guys can see that there, but that tire is lifted off the ground, and I have barely any tire contact right there. So that means that when I'm driving in the game, unless I'm going around a corner and my car shifts to one side or the other side, I will never make full contact with my tires, which will decrease my speed and grip. And because of that, if you're new and you don't really want to go fast, that's understandable. You don't have to do that. But what you want to do so that you don't run into this problem of losing speed and grip, because it could cause you to spin out if you're new, it could cause a lot of things. You know, your car could feel very unstable. What you want to do is in the rear, I would never run anything lower than a negative 0.5 camber. Like, it's okay to run more camber in the front. You can run like up to 7 camber in the front if you want. You can run as much camber in the front as you want. I mean, don't run too much, you know, don't go crazy with it. You want your tires to be somewhat touching the ground, but in the rear, never go past like a negative 1.5 camber and you should be good. But honestly, I wouldn't even keep it there. If you want the most grip and the most speed and better transitions, I would just make it a little positive so that your tires are more than likely going to be making contact with the ground more than usual compared to if they were on, you know, a negative camber. And basically all a camber does is this. So with a negative camber, it takes the tire and it tilts it this way inside so that the tire is diagonally sticking out from the bottom. And what positive camber does is it takes the top of the tire and turns it out this way so that the bottom of the tire is turning inward. And the reason that this is important is because you need to be able to adjust this so that when you're going around a corner and your car is tilting and shifting, the tire can continue to make contact with the ground. Because for example, if I'm going around a corner with the car set up like this, my tires are probably never going to make full contact with the ground. And when you're drifting, your tires need to be making contact with the ground as much as possible at all times for the best results. So with that being said, I'm going to run my rear camber at like a 1.03, and I never go over a 1.5 positive or 1.5 negative for rear camber, just to let y'all know. So what I'm going to do is just run it at a 1 or 1.04, and then I'll do my front camber. You can really do, like what I do for front camera is I go between -3 to like -7, but I never really do high numbers. I kind of like to keep my, you know, camber low. I don't really like a high camber. So what I'm gonna do is a 5.09 negative camber for the front. I said I was gonna show you guys a tune for 90, 100, and 120, but I feel like this should be enough information for you guys to be able to build your cars. I'm literally breaking this down like Tetris blocks right now. So drop a like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Thank you guys, I appreciate it. But next thing, the front and rear anti-roll bars, man. So basically what the front and rear anti-roll bars are is they are a weight that will prevent body roll on the car. So for example, when you go into a game and you start driving and taking corners, if you notice your car is, you know, tilting side to side on every single corner, that means that your body roll or your anti-roll bars are way too low and you need to turn them up. So if your car is like going side to side, like yeah, that's why that's happening. So usually what I do is, depending on the weight of the car, will determine, you know, how much anti-roll bar I use. So for a car between like 1200 to 1500 kilograms, you want to use about anti-roll bar in the front and rear of about 15 to sometimes even 35. So for this car, it is 1300 kilograms, so I'm gonna just run 20. So for most Nissans in the game, if they're about 1200, 1300, 1400 kilograms, you can run about 15 to like 25, maybe even 30 anti-roll bar, and you should be just fine because these cars don't have a lot of weight and don't get much body roll. For the caster, basically this affects the pivot of your tire when you're drifting around a corner, and I've seen it also affect how wide you get around the corner. Like it says right there, the higher the value is, the quicker the steering wheel reacts to changes in direction of the car's motion in a drift, but higher value reduces the grip of the front wheels at large drift angles. So if you have this at a higher value, then at larger angles, because of the fact that it brings your tire off the ground, you see that right there? You see how the tire is flat on the ground? And then when you have it at a higher value, the tire is kind of like looking like camber, so where it's not, you know, making so much grip. So that means if you have it too high, that at a large angle, you will barely have any grip and probably get understeer or spin out, whatever the case may be. I've never experienced that because I've never had my caster that high. But for most cars, what you want to run for front caster is you can run anywhere from like a 4 all the way to a 10. At least that's the range I stay in. So for this car, I'm gonna do a 9, but if I feel like I'm getting too wide on like large corners and I'm not able to pull in, what I want to do is turn it down. So if you're going around small corners and it feels just fine, and then you go around like a really wide corner and you feel like your car just wants to like go backwards and kind of like slide off the track, you know, it's not really pulling in, you definitely want to turn your caster down so you can pull in better on those corners. Ackerman Angle. Okay, so basically with Ackerman, I've heard a lot of people in the community say that if you're not playing on 100% Ackerman or high Ackerman, then you're not a pro, you're not this, you're not that. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to agree to disagree, because basically all your Ackerman does is this. If you have a high Ackerman, your car will act as if it has an unlocked steering angle, which will reduce front tire rub when you're drifting, but it will make it a lot easier for you to spin out, and it'll also give you more speed because it will be like basically no front tire track. Now when you have a lower Ackerman angle, it locks the steering angle and it kind of acts as a safety net. So a lot of people are running around like 20 to 40, maybe 30% Ackerman, because around that range, it's like a safety net. If you get too wide, you won't spin out because the car will only allow you to turn so far. So for right now, I'm gonna keep this at 30%. And if you ever go around a corner and it feels like you're spinning out, unless you like to spin out and run high Ackerman, or you're used to it and can drift with it, then what you want to do if you're spinning out is you want to come in here and just lower it little by little until you're no longer spinning out. But you don't want to lower it so far to the point to where you're not getting any angle. So if you need to lower it pretty far and just practice, just slowly start to raise it up and see what number is comfortable for you, and that should be good. Max steering angle, you always want to run max steering angle at max, because otherwise how you going to be getting a lot of angle? I mean, shit. Okay, so that is the suspension setup. Now once you're finished actually doing all the settings in the suspension, you want to come back and just look at your ride height. So like in the rear, that's definitely too high. What I want to do is I want to put it to like probably like right about there. I say right there would be good, and that just, you know, lowers it down a little bit and gives the tire more room to kind of like, you know, bounce around. And I'm probably gonna have to adjust the suspension again once I adjust the wheel track, but let me go ahead and lower it down in the front too. So in the front, like I said, you always want to make sure you have clearance and your tire is not like rubbing through. So I'm gonna go to caster. On console you may not be able to zoom in, but as you guys can see, I have more than enough clearance there, so that's good. So when I'm at full lock, my car will not be you know, it will not be rubbing through the bumper or anything like that. Hold on, I have a glitch. Let me go ahead and reset this really quick. My car is like sliding forward, so this is not good. Save changes. Oh yeah, if you're making a tune and you press circle, it will not save it for some reason. You have to like go to test drive. I don't know why, but for me, it has not been letting me save my tunes like when I make a change. So we did all of the suspension now. Like I said, we're gonna go ahead and go to wheels. So for the wheels, or for the rims I should say, the bigger your rims, the harder it is for your engine to turn those wheels. So if you have a car with like low horsepower and you have big wheels on it and it feels like it's not getting much acceleration, then the wheels are too big or your tires are too wide. If you feel like you're getting too much acceleration and you're just redlining, either your transmission tune needs to be changed or your wheels are way too small. So for a car that has, let's just see how much horsepower this has. Usually I'll just turn my engine settings all the way up. So this car has 1,000 horsepower. So for a car with 1,000 horsepower, you can run, for example, you can run any tire, or you can run any rim in tire size, but for Nissans, what I've seen work is 19s on 265s, 18s on 285s. You just have to find like some kind of combination that works for you. But even if it's not a Nissan, basically the same thing applies. If your car feels like it's really slow, your wheels are probably too big. Like honestly, even on an R35 with like 1500 horse, I never go over rim size of 20, or at least I try not to. And the max tire width I'll run is 325, but you should rarely need 325. On most of the cars that you build, you're going to be running 265s, 285s, 245s, or something around that range. So for this car, what I'll be running is you know, a front and rear tire of 19, because the car does have 1100 horse. Now if the car had 1000 horse, I'd still probably run 19s, but if the car had 900, I would do 18s on 280s. And if 18s on 285s didn't feel good, then I'd probably lower it down to 260s. Now with the tire width, basically your tire width will control how easy it is for your car to get sideways, because the more tire width you have, the bigger the contact patch you have with the ground, which means it's going to be a lot harder for your car to get sideways, depending on the build setup that you have. So usually what I'll do is, like I said, I'll run 19s on 265s. Now if I'm drifting and I feel like my car is getting way too sideways or turning way too fast, I'm definitely going to want to turn up that tire width so I can smoothen it out and slow down my transitions a little bit if need be, and things of that nature. So if your car feels like it's a little too slippery, maybe try turning up your tire width and lowering your tire pressure. That's the next thing, tire pressure. The higher the tire pressure you have, the less grip you'll have. The lower tire pressure you have, the more grip you have. It's kind of like a drag car going in on a track, you know? That's why they have like that low tire pressure. Ever seen a drag car with like really low tires? The tires almost look flat. Well, the reason they run them like that is to help with grip. But there's also other things that help with drag car grip. We're not here to talk about drag cars, but for a car, you would be building on like, let's say 100 adhesion, since 100 adhesion is like really popular. A lot of people will say this isn't realistic, but in this game, this is just what you have to do. So for 100 adhesion, you're gonna be running anywhere between 70 tire pressure in the rear to, I'd say, about 95 if you want speed and like decent grip. Like usually what I run is like a 78 or like 77, 75, 80, something like that. And you always want the rear tire pressure to be lower than the front. So you want the front to be higher than the rear. So what I'll do is you want to have your front tire pressure, I'd say about 5, 10, 15, 20 kPa higher than the rear, or you know, set it to wherever you feel comfortable with it. Wheel adhesion, basically all this does is affect the car's traction. So there's different traction settings in this game. If you have 90 adhesion, you have like barely any traction, which means that on the ground you'll feel like you like have no grip. It'll be like ice kind of. A lot of people like it. It's not that bad. Go ahead and try it out. 100 adhesion will just give you a little bit more grip and a little bit more better handling and like a better steering action. 110 will give you even more grip, and then 120 will give you the most grip and the best reaction to steering inputs basically. But for today, since 100 adhesion is one of the most popular tractions or adhesions in the game, we're going to be running that. Next thing we want to do is take a look at the car, and we're going to adjust the wheel track. So it's always good to have more wheel track in the front than in the back. I wish they would call these the same thing, but the rear base is the rear base and the front track is the front track. So usually what I'll do is I'll bring this out just until the outside of the tire is like sitting like right on the edge of the fender like that. So that's like perfect for me. If it's poking out a little farther than, you know, it needs to, that's fine, but I usually try to bring it out like that just because I like to have, you know, clean fitment. But if you don't really care about clean fitment, then just put your wheel tracks at whatever you want. And then for the rear, you know, I'll put it like right there just so the tire is like barely coming out. But you definitely want to widen it out because I feel like the car looks really weird if you come out to the track and it's like this. It's like, why do you have all that body kit and no wide body for the body kit, you know? So we're gonna do 7 in the front, and then we're gonna do 3 in the back. Next thing is tire profile. Now, the higher the tire profile you have, the bouncier and more slippery your car will be. Also, the harder it may be for your car to turn depending on how big your tire profile is, because it gets pretty crazy. As you can see here, it would be really hard, not impossible, but really hard to drift a car like this. So on every car that I've built, I never go over 35% tire profile. Anything over 35 just feels like so uncontrollable. Like it says, it affects the handling and the smoothness of the ride. You don't have to worry about off-road performance. We're not doing rally racing here, but for this car, you're going to be safe with 25%, 30%, or 35%. And that's for like really any car that you have. But for higher horsepower cars, if you're used to running 30% and the car has like a lot of horsepower, you may want to try 30 or 35 because it'll help even out the power band in the transmission a little bit, because the tires will be a little bit bigger, which will make it a little bit harder for the transmission to push if you need that effect on the car. It just depends. So like I said, I'm gonna run 30%, just like that. And I kind of like how the suspension's looking, you know. I don't want to have it too low, so I'm gonna just leave it like that. Usually your suspension should look something like this, or your front could be way higher, but usually with my cars, my front spring length is only 1 centimeter more than the rear. So that's the wheels all explained. For the engine, you just go ahead and turn everything up to max, and if you don't want to turn everything up to max, then you don't have to. Just, you know, adjust and find whatever settings you like. But just know that the engine tune-up at base will only increase torque and horsepower. Your max torque will affect only your horsepower. Your rev limiter will also only affect your horsepower and your top speed, actually. Wait. Yes, it'll affect your horsepower and top speed. Anything that affects your horsepower will affect your top speed. The turbocharger will basically make the engine either naturally aspirated or unnaturally aspirated. Naturally aspirated means that it doesn't have any outside form of boost or power to make the car go quicker. And if it's unnaturally aspirated, or if it has like a boost or turbo kit on it, it would have a supercharger or a turbo or NOS, which would make it to where the car is getting extra power from, you know, back pressure, or if you had a supercharger, your crankshaft would be able to spin a lot faster. And if you had NOS, then you would have, you know, higher octane or whatever. I don't know how nitrous works, but you get the point. So basically, the more turbo pressure or boost that you have, the more wheel spin you're going to get. So what a lot of people in comps will do is, because we're limited to 1,000 horsepower in a lot of comps, a lot of people, even if they do make 1,000 horsepower, they'll turn down the turbo pressure just a little, because it gives you more grip. Because when you have that much boost, it's going to be a lot easier for those tires to spin. And if you want to avoid that, you definitely want to turn the turbo down a little bit if you're competing in comps and stuff. Other than that, if you're just doing multiplayer, single player, you just play the game for fun, just go full send, man. Turn everything all the way up. Now, this is the next thing. This is the part that everybody is so afraid of. But today, I'm going to make it so simple. Literally, a kindergartner could tune a car. So basically, if you have a locked diff, it'll make it so a locked diff will make it easier for your car to get sideways, and it'll also ensure that both of your wheels are spinning at the same speed at all times, or it'll make sure that they're more than likely spinning at the same speed at all times. What a locked diff does is it converts the power from the engine through the drive shaft into the diff through both tires at equal rates. But when you have an unlocked diff, then you get things like one tire fire, where if you go to do a burnout IRL or something like that, one tire will be doing a burnout, the other one won't, and that's the result of an unlocked diff. Now for a drift car, you don't have to have you don't have to have exactly a locked diff, but I would keep your diff lock ratio above a 0.60 at least, because it's better to have a limited slip than just, you know, a diff that could literally like just, you know, one tire fire or anything like that. So you want to, if you don't want to run a locked diff, it's okay, but I run locked diff on every car and I love the feeling. Now, final drive. Final drive is pretty easy to explain. The higher this number is, the lower these numbers will be. The lower this number is, the higher these numbers will be. So if you have a high final drive, these numbers on the sliders are going to be really high, or no, really low if you have a high final drive. If you have a low final drive, these numbers are going to be higher. So for every car that I build, what I do is I keep my final drive at lowest. I'll do 3.30, which is really low. So if you want to go slow at first, go ahead and do that. But I keep mine between 3.30 and 420. So find a magic number somewhere in there for your car. There's no perfect number for each car. It just depends on how the car feels. But for this car, since it has around 1100 horse, I've noticed with cars that have like around 1100 horse, like a final drive, depending on the weight distribution and the overall weight of the car, I'd use a final drive of 3.60 to a 4, sometimes higher. Like I said, sometimes I'll go like 405, 410, 420, something like that. It just depends. Gear 1, you always want to keep this between a 310 and a 330. So for this car, we'll just put it at a 320. So basically, with the gearing setup, I'm just going to do this first before I explain everything, but your gear 1's always going to be between 310 and 330 on every car. It's like perfect if you use these final drive settings of between 330 to 420 for the final drive. But gear 2, usually what I'll do at gear 2 is I do not correlate gear 2 and gear 1 at all. Gear 2 should not be that high. If you want to get like power on the lower end of the power band, then you want to put your gear 2 at around a 1 sorry, excuse my voice. You want to put your power band at around a 1.30 to a 1.5 for gear 2. That's how you're going to get the most power out of gear 2. So for this car, I'm going to do my gear 2 at a 3.3, or no, at a 1.32, and I'm going to leave it there. Now this is the easy trick right here with tuning the transmission. This is the easiest trick. So what you want to do, you see how this is 1.32. Now this is going to be 1.16. Basically what I do for my tunes is I make, after gear 2, I try to break the numbers down with a kind of like an algorithm that I made up. So if this is 32, this is 16. If this is 16, that's 1.08. If that's 1.08, then the next one, you know, as the gears go up, you want to make sure that the numbers drop a little less so that you can still gain speed. So what I'll do is I'll do half of the 32 on second, I'll do half of the 16 on third, and then instead of doing half of 0.8, or instead of doing half of 0.08, what I'll do is I'll go a little bit lower than half, because like I said, the higher the gear, the more speed you want to have. So if I do this at a 1.04, yeah, it'll still, you know, move, but the gear's not going to have as much room to build up speed. The lower number that you have, the more the more speed that car is able to build up. But you don't want to have the numbers so low that the car is unable to build up speed, and you don't want to have it so high to where it builds up speed too fast and you have no power band. And then for gear 6, basically it'll be a 0.98. So I'll explain if you guys want to write this down, I would write it down if I were you. I'll explain my gearing ratio. So look, so I already explained, you know, gear 1, it'll be between 310 and you know, what was that, 350, yeah. And then for the final drive, it'll be between 330 and 420. Now after gear 2, like final drive and gear 1 are pretty easy to set up. Like those are like the least you worries. It's really easy to set up. It should look something like this. But for gear 2, there's going to be a 0.16 difference between gear 2 and gear 3, depending on your build. So like for example, if I had a 0.40, then there would be a 20 difference, you know, just like that. So depending on your build, it's going to determine how your breakdown or algorithm looks. But for my algorithm right here, you got a 16 difference, and then it goes from 16 and I chop it in half to 8, which will give it more room for speed, because if I just keep chopping it down half, little by little, I'm not going to have a lot of speed. And then instead of chopping it down half, again, like I said, I go a little bit lower than half and go to 1.02, which will be like a 6 difference. So it goes a 16, 18, 6, 4. That's the rhythm, or that's the code to my tunes. It's 16, 8, 6, 4. Yep, that's it. 16, 8, 6, 4. That's the difference in my gears from 2 to 6. Now, I already explained the brakes. Basically, with this, the front brake bias, this will determine if your brake pressure is more leaning toward the front or the rear. I usually like to run my front brake bias at 70% for every car. It's pretty universal, but if you want a little bit lower, basically you can go ahead and turn it down, and this will affect your handbrake, the way your handbrake feels. So usually I keep this at about 60 to 70%, no higher, no lower than that. And then for the brake torque, you want to keep this between 3,250 and 3,500, and you should be set. So now that we have the car tuned up, let's go ahead and take it out and see if everything I said actually applies to the car and will work. So let's try this out. So I'm not gonna drift yet. I'm gonna wait till we get to the actual track just so you guys can see it. But like I said, man, if this video is helpful at all, make sure you guys drop a like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. It really took me a long time to think of, you know, how to put this video together and, like, you know, plan out the thoughts, because I literally had to plan out an hour of thoughts and information, which I was able to do it, but you know, it was really challenging. So if you guys could really show me a lot of support in this video, I'd greatly appreciate it. And with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys the R32 Tune and let's see how it's doing. So here we go. So things to look for is transition speed, bounciness, and how much power you get in each gear. So if there's anything wrong with those things, you'll just have to make adjustments. So for example, if I find an issue with this car, I'll tell you how to fix it. So let me just keep drifting for a little bit. So there is one thing I'm noticing when I'm going around a long corner, my car does kind of start to like pull out to the edge, which means that I need to go and lower my caster a little bit. So I'm gonna lower my caster down to an 8. You can adjust this by 0.9 each time or 0.5. So I just went down from a 9 to an 8. So now let's see how my car reacts on corners now. Will it still pull out or is it gonna pull in more? Now it feels like it wants to pull in more. It doesn't feel like it wants to go off the edge of the track anymore. Now it has a way better pull in. Another thing you guys want to keep in mind when driving these cars, this is just a tip for anybody, is if your car is ever going like too sideways or you feel like you're about to go off the track, let off the gas a little and it'll pull you in. That's all you gotta do. Like here, I'll show you right here. So I'm going too sideways, I let off the gas a little, I feather it, it pulls me in. So like right here, I'm going off, I let off a little and then re-accelerate, pulls me in. So that's a really good trick or tip at staying on the track. But other than that, I don't really see anything wrong with this build. Seems really smooth, seems really reliable. If I was new to the game, I would definitely love this tune and I would use it. So with that being said, that was gonna wrap up the video. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. This has been your boy TSSH, and today I taught you guys how to tune in CarX Drift Racing, and I hope you guys enjoyed, and God bless. I will see you guys next time. Peace. Also, I'm gonna go ahead and throw the tune up one more time for everybody that may have missed it or that was following along but didn't quite get every number. So watch till the end. I'm gonna go ahead and throw the tune up for you guys right now.